Alright guys, so today we're talking about cutting the rings from these coils that I've made. So you've seen me, if you watch the other two videos, you've seen me twisting the brass and stainless wire together, and then you've seen me coiling these guys into coils. These are all the coils I made. And so now we need to cut the rings out. I don't want to use bolt cutters because that pretty well mangles the ends of the wire, and then the rings don't sit very well together, or the ends of the wire don't sit well together. So we're going to be using a Dremel with the thinnest cutoff wheels I could get, which is these guys. And unfortunately, it just takes a lot of these. I know that people do use jewelry saws and other methods like that. There are better ways to do it than how I'm doing it, but this is the setup I have access to at the moment, so this is what I'm working with. It'll generally take me slightly more than an entire cutoff disc to cut an entire coil, so I'll end up having to change the disc part of the way through. But basically, I just turn my Dremel on, which I have clamped in this fixture, and then I'll feed the coils in slightly below the center line, and the rings will mostly just bounce straight into here or get scattered around here. Every once in a while, they'll fly out in another direction and I'll have to go find them. It'd be nice if I could make some kind of like plexiglass enclosure for this or something. But if I was going to those lengths, I would probably just make a better jig entirely. So eye protection, ear protection, and breath protection, lung protection. Yeah, jeez. All right, since we're making a bunch of dust, we do not want to be breathing it. We don't want to breathe stainless steel dust, brass dust, or the dust from the cutting discs themselves. And again, this sounds pretty awful, but oh well. So first I'm just going to snip off this little end piece and toss that away, and then I'll start cutting the rings properly. And this disc is already partially used, so I'm going to have to change them part of the way through. Fascinating. These do get pretty hot while you're cutting them off. They cool off fairly quickly, but you don't want to be holding them. And you have to hold pretty close to the end of the coil as you're cutting, because otherwise there's a bunch of flex in the system, and the disc will try to catch it, and it's likely to break the disc or mangle your rings. So you have to hold just enough for like maybe 3 or 4 rings that you can cut before you have to readjust your grip again. that one's about dead. If you're careful and lucky, the disc won't break on you, and you can use basically the entire thing. There's virtually nothing left to this one. Waste not, want not. And I just finger tighten that. Use a pair of pliers to hold on to it for the last bit. There we go. Grab those little scraps from the end. And there you have it. That is how I'm cutting all these rings out. And so now I've just got 60-something coils left to do. I've got plenty of cutting discs left. I think that should cover it. But that's my general process. I can show you a slightly better view of how I built this jig. It's just built on a piece of scrap plywood I had hanging around. And I glued and maybe screwed these two blocks on just wide enough that this Dremel would fit through. And then I'm using, as a clamp, just a piece of 1/4-inch plywood that basically is just acting as a spring that is screwed down to keep it tight. Super, super simple. It's pretty robust. I mean, it's not really going anywhere, especially with the relatively small forces we're dealing with here. And that's a little plate to keep stuff from flying that way. That Tupperware to catch the rings. Here's one that made it out. I think one of them fell into the table saw earlier. Actually, let me see if I can find it. Do we have one? I don't see it. Well, maybe I'll never see that one again. Oh well. But I've got thousands more to do, so happy crafting. Have a great day.